If you've ever felt overwhelmed by productivity advice or maybe struggled to bridge that gap between your big picture goals and the reality of your day-to-day life, you're not alone. Today's guest invites us to consider how can we intentionally design our days in service of a good life. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Building Thinkers podcast, accessible blueprints for learning and life. My guest started out in graphic design, took a side turn into physical theater, and then found his way into adult education, coaching, and personal development. Through all of it, he's been drawn to the art of shaping things, people, products, organizations, and now days. He's the creator of Day Crafting, a practice rooted in behavior design, positive psychology, and centuries-old wisdom. I'm so delighted to be joined today by
Bruce Stanley.
How do you help people start in that place?
With day crafting, most people are finding their way to me through, I'm inviting people into my workshop to learn this new craft. And I think they're people that have tried personal development or improvement or whatever in many other ways and have found that the more traditional coaching patterns aren't working for them. That actually here there's lots and lots of coaches, lots of people are either professional coaches or there are people within the workplace who were taught the coaching journey or the relationship or whatever. But actually, I think it's only appropriate for a very small number of people who are naturally wired up to be kind of high achievers. So coaching is very appropriate for people that are wanting through competition to become the best at whatever the thing is that they're wanting to do. That's actually a small group of people. Right at the other end of the scale, of course, we've had an explosion. The idea of this Eastern kind of mindfulness, being very present, becoming the observer of this now.
Right.
That I think is quite far up to the other extreme. The rest of us, if you like, are perhaps looking for something more creative, gentler. The thing that's interesting about the model of the day, this rhythm of the kind of 24 hours that we're in, a lot of the dynamics that are relevant to us developing and achieving what is a flourishing or a happy or a good life are actually sat in that 24 hours. And they're not big, grand, me at my very best. Forget high achievement, think small achievement. And actually then developing the discipline to do that day after day, that's when something very interesting starts to shift.
I hear you comparing to some of the traditional coaching, and you started with this idea of the like further off big flourishing life and those goals. Do you think you have to do any of that work of the bigger picture? Or a lot of people start with values and purpose or a life compass, the things that guide you. Do you need to do any of that work first to start to come back to the day and break it down into the small pieces of the 24 hours? Or in day crafting, maybe you can give us more of the definition of day crafting. Do you start there in the day, and how do you decide how to go out from there? I'm wondering about the mechanics and the structure.
I'm much more interested in your behavior, what you do, how you react to the things that are in front of you. For example, somebody says to you, I'm moving house. It's going to be a Saturday in a couple of months' time. Would you be free to help me move? The part of your brain that answers that question is this executive part, the one that uses values, the one that thinks into the future, the one that uses language. And it says, yes, of course, because I'm that nice person, I would do that. Now, when it gets to that Saturday and you wake up that morning, now there's something else present. There's a much more powerful part of you that's present. And that part of you, what I would say in that situation is, why on earth did I think this was a good idea? What was I thinking? This is the last thing I want to be doing today. So us in the day, which is you are in no other place than in the day that you are in. This is the reality of our existence, is I'm in the day that the previous version of me planned for me to be, but it didn't plan around the fact that I'm also present with this much larger, much more instinctive, emotional part of myself. So what we need instead is strategy. So the compass, strategy, learning the techniques of strategy are all about responding much more to the realities of the real territory we're in. How can we get you living a good life? How can we get you into a place where you are flourishing? Well, the good life is not a future destination. It's a daily practice. And that sounds really simple, but actually cracking it is a lot harder.
We can assume, I think, that if somebody is interested in personal development, there's something they want to develop, something they want to change. They're not yet necessarily satisfied with where they are. So there is this tension. And I'm wondering, as you think about that tension and they're starting with considering the day, where do you take them from there?
Let's say the second step in any crafting journey. The first is really to just explore what the material is that we're talking about. So the fact that it's a craft is very helpful because people have an instinctive idea of what learning a craft might be. So they can imagine going to their local evening school and learning how to carve or throw a pot or paint a picture or weave or something. In your first half an hour, you're just going to learn a little bit about the material, maybe be introduced to a couple of tools. That's it. Well, 6 weeks on, that same group that started a ceramic class, they've all headed off in different directions. So this answers your question. And what it is for adults is I need to introduce a process fairly early on that gets them to realize what they are motivated to try and solve. And for adults, that's the next problem. So adults learn differently to children, as you and many of your listeners will know. So when you're a child at school, the curriculum is decided by the teachers. You're learning stuff that you don't necessarily get to apply immediately. You're learning information that you get to apply later on in life or in a different context. Adults don't want to learn that way. Adults want to learn by solving a problem that they are currently exploring. So in day crafting, I split that very quickly into 4 areas that cover the whole of your day, but they're very simple. First one is maintenance, everything to do with looking after yourself, how that energy gets in, basically. The next related levels, this is more about how the energy is spent. There's the quality of your inner life. There's also, therefore, the quality of your action and your behavior, the things that you do. I intended to get through this list of stuff today, but I only got half of it done, or the quality of how you are connecting with the people around you, that kind of thing. And the fourth is purpose, your purpose in the everyday. It's maybe a smaller P purpose. Once you start to get people to begin reflecting on the quality of their day, they will quite quickly report the things that aren't working.
When you think about these problems that many of the people that you've been working with and your apprentices are working with, the things that they're bringing forward, are you seeing particular themes on what people are struggling with?
I think it won't come as a surprise to realize that we're all struggling because of the screens never being off. I noticed that Microsoft put out a report in the last few days talking about the infinite workday, the number of interruptions or emails that you're doing when you're at home, that kind of thing. I like to go a little bit further with this, though, and to push people to realizing, and this is really quite deep stuff, but the difference between being reactive and reflective, that's a big area. And again, the reasons why people get themselves to this point are quite big, but we end up in a reactive life, forever being bombarded. Stuff is being pushed to us by multiple sources. There are multiple requests, as opposed to a reflective life. Well, maybe a reflective life is too much to expect for people to go from that kind of binary one to another, but maybe day crafting would suggest using this idea of blueprints, designing a day, could be tomorrow, but it could be a day next week, where you actually put in some time for reflection. And maybe we can start to increase and develop that. There are a couple of models that have been stamped on most of us as modern knowledge workers that I don't think fit how we would naturally be. So one of those is the distinction between clock time and event time. Clock time is you looking at your schedule, or maybe your schedule is finding you and bleeping on your watch or your phone. And it says, it's 9 o'clock, you need to do this, 10 o'clock, you do this. That's clock time. If we stand sideways and we look at that as designers of a day, is that necessarily getting the best out of you? Is that the best way for you to be productive? Well, you might be ticking more off your to-do list, but is the quality of what you're actually getting done as deep as it would be if instead you were on what the researchers call event time? Now, event time is different. Most people who are stuck on clock time possibly think they don't know what I'm talking about, but if you've ever gone on holiday or had days off, it's very unlikely your days are scheduled. You've maybe got a loose to-do list in your head, but you're more likely to be on event time. I'm going to do this for as long as I feel like it. Ideally, I might even forget what time it is, and when I'm hungry, I'm going to do this, eat, stop and eat, or I'll move on to the next thing. Well, we could design our days to be much more around event time rather than clock time. One last answer to your question is autonomy. I think this is leading people into a lot of problems. The problem is your autonomous day is being designed for you by this part of the brain that I talked about that isn't actually very good at designing our days. I've been freelance for most of my career, and I am the worst boss I could ever work for. My own autonomy means that I work too long, that I give myself a hard time, that I feel guilty for taking breaks, all of those kind of things. So we're in a place where we actually need to bring back some shape, some discipline, some harder edges to what we do.
Bruce, I love that you went in that direction, because I had pulled something from your Day Crafter website where you talked about how you said, I'm fortunate enough to be in control of my schedule. So why does the 9-to-5 work ethic, amongst other influences, still loom and glower over my thinking? And I very much resonate with this. I also have been running Building Thinkers since 2014 and largely make my own schedule. Of course, client work and things like that, it, does influence the timing. But I find that I have to be intentional about that reflection and spend a fair bit of time pre-thinking to create the type of space that you're talking about that is the event time. Much more often, I am on clock time and into all of the nuances of productivity, and have done a lot of research into productivity. And I think can also parse out the difference between getting more done and getting quality things done. And yet there is definitely still this inertia from the patterns of the 9-to-5. And you also reference on your website the idea of capitalism and the ideas of more. And so what would you say to our listeners that are in the same place as us, of the 9-to-5, even though we might have the flexibility and autonomy, to your point?
I mean, you've done something that a lot of people have yet to realize they need to do as the first step, is to realize you come with inherited rules, a whole load of ideas about what you should and shouldn't do. And well, there's two things that we can do, I suppose. One is that you could spend an awful long time gazing at those rules and attempting to erase them. The positive psychology answer would say, do something instead. So yes, if you're aware of a loud rule, it's a matter of kind of shrinking it or finding the excuse that works with your own motivation to allow you to experiment, to do something else. So let's say the 9-to-5 is what we would call a segmented day. And let's say if we were to talk, it may be, Tracy, that we would get to the point where we would uncover your rules and realize that what's behind them, the values that we eventually get to, is about being productive. Well, if we've captured the idea that you want to be productive, I might then say, well, let's throw in a word you're not expecting, which is play. Let's experiment with that. Let's do something. And you freak out. You say, I can't possibly, I'm so comfortable in my train tracks. And then this is one of the deliberate parts of day crafting. We're just going to do this one day next week. We're just going to try something different. You're going to go from a segmented day to an integrated day. You're still going to get the same number of things done, but you're going to forget the 9 to 5. It's going to feel awkward. But what about starting work really early, doing a couple of hours before everybody else is up, even if you're not an early riser? Scary thought. And then deliberately, we're going to do 5 hours of nothing to do with energy going out and being productive. We're actually going to use those 5 hours, the best hours of the day, how could we, for energy coming in. And then we're going to slot in another couple of hours in the afternoon and possibly just run the experiment and start to see, try to explore. And if you really want to be kind of scientific about it, is to introduce some metrics. If being productive is important, this is the big aha for people who come on the Day Crafting Apprentice course, is building towards swapping your to-do list for a when to-do list. Can I explain what I mean?
Yes, please.
I love this. If I was to get you or any of your listeners right now to imagine as a kind of a graph, you could just draw on a piece of paper what your energy does during the day, during the 16 hours you're awake. Most people will draw, it will start maybe 2/3 up. There'll be a dip, sort of lunchtime, early afternoon, and then it'll rise again. Possibly it'll rise even higher than it was to begin with. What we unpack is that energy isn't one amorphous energy. That energy represents, let's say, about 6 different sub-energy types that you have during the day. One of those energy types would be you as the cognitive, logical thinker. Mm-hmm. So this is you report writing or editing or thinking really hard about something. There's a different type of cognitive work, which is cognitive creative. It's entirely different. It uses different parts of the brain and it follows different subconscious rules to allow it to work well. You've also got social energy, physical energy, emotional energy. Now, each of those have got a 2 or 3 hour peak within that bigger energy graph that I drew, that we can imagine during the day. So your peak time for doing cognitive logical work, I bet, Tracy, you know exactly when yours is. Mm. If you are an average person who sort of wakes up around 7 o'clock and goes to bed at 11 o'clock, then you're the right-hander in a right-hander's world. So you're what I call a Finch chronotype. Your best time for doing cognitive work is a 2 to 3 hour window mid-morning. Mm. It's not when you're best being creative. It's not when we should schedule brainstorming or great creative work. Interestingly, that's going to sit totally outside your 9 to 5. That's going to be in the evening. So this is where you might start to get intrigued by some of the experiments that you can run. So I start to work with people to design the day, not around their to-do list, but around their when to-do list, to start to shift things around in the schedule. For something as simple as that, you can raise your performance in any of those things that matter by 20%. People that drive early afternoon, their driving ability is as if they were driving at the drink drive limit, a couple of pints in. That's how much your cognitive ability has dipped, your reaction time has dipped in the afternoon. It's why the 100 meters and 200 meters at the Olympics are in the evening, because our physical high burst energy peaks at that time. It's why in the afternoon, if you are going to schedule a dentist appointment for something quite painful, try and schedule it for the afternoon, because your perception of pain is at its lowest mid-afternoon, etc., etc., etc. All of these things. Imagine a business that schedules around when its employees' natural energy rhythms are high for particular types of tasks, but all you're doing is shifting a few things around and seeing a 20% boost to your abilities. It's worth an experiment.
the idea of trying something with this lens, or I like the posture of experimentation, allows for us to hold it at arm's length and just say, let's give it a go and see what happens. And to your point of the metrics, I think that can help us have evidence for then what does work for us. And as you were sharing about that, I was thinking in particular for folks that are listening that are in a role where they have a lot of control over their schedule, this should be one of the freedoms and opportunities that's afforded by having that environment. So it's almost as if we don't experiment there. We are kind of locking ourselves into maybe less potential than what's possible.
We've bought into this very crazy model as to what our days should be like. We're working more, we're working longer hours than we were. One of the most revealing books that I inevitably end up talking about is Mason Curry's book, Daily Rituals. It's not a positive psychology, there's no science in it. It's a loo book, you know, the kind of books that people put in the loo that you can just kind of flick. Is that a thing?
Processing. Got it.
It's the sort of book that you can flick to just about any random page and learn something interesting, because what he's done is collected the evidence of the schedules of all of the great composers, thinkers, scientists, writers. What you find if you deconstruct the model that he comes up with is that the thing that seemed most important to their day was where the energy came in, the effective rest. Mm-hmm. The part of the day where there were no constraints, nobody telling you what to do. That's the time of the day that you were going to have a long extended lunch with friends or go for a walk or do whatever it was. We don't do that. We don't prioritize energy in, we prioritize energy out. So all the way through his book, you see this pattern of maybe 3 to 4 hours. It crops up time and time again. The deep work, as Cal Newport would call it, the really deep cognitive, productive work is no more than about 4 hours of anybody's day, and usually a lot less. If we are able to be as productive as we possibly could be on no more than 4 hours a day, this is the first step of what a much more challenging day might be like. So instead of how much can I get out of an 8-hour workday, how much can you get out of a 4-hour workday, and how seriously can you take the part of the day which is about your energy coming in? So rest comes in 2 flavors. It comes in passive and active. So passive rest is, I am so exhausted, the last thing I want to do is to think what to use my rest time for. I'm going to turn on the screen. So you need to get to designing rest beforehand, because really good quality rest is never going to magically turn up. It has to be a thing that you take. I bet most people listening who've got a job have got a job description that goes with it. Have they got a rest description? Have they got something as detailed that they considered, that they decided to sign their name to, that styles how seriously they take rest? Mm-hmm. I think of us firstly as Mesolithic hunter-gatherers, where we single-tasked. We maybe had one task in the day. We weren't trying to get 3 things done. We were definitely on event time. Lots of time to rest, lots of time to be in connection with. This is a vital part of us as humans. We need to be in very high quality connection with. Mm-hmm. And you see less and less of that.
Yes. I have a question around this, if I may.
Yeah, go.
This is from the most recent HBR, the Harvard Business Review, and I came across this graph that they have that is about the uses of artificial intelligence, and they're showing how it's changing over time. So imagine a graph that has 2024 and 2025 showing the different uses. What I noticed was the top use case in 2025 is in connection to what you just spoke about. What would you guess, Bruce?
I know the answer to this, unfortunately, but yes, it's being in connection. It's therapy. It's
therapy, companionship.
Yeah.
is number one. And so when I was talking earlier about the problems that people are having that they're bringing, I mean, that says to me that one of the most transformative technologies that everybody's wrestling with right now, what are people going to it for? Increasingly for therapy and companionship. I have all sorts of thoughts about this, of course, but it's the root underneath goes to where you were headed, I think, in connection. And so why might being intentional about crafting our day result in improvements in connection?
To be time and energy rich so that you can give your full attention through connection so that what matters knows it does. Can I give you that again?
Yes, please. That's beautiful.
To be time and energy rich so that you can give your full attention through connection so that what matters knows it does.
Can you give us an example of the kinds of changes that people might have or ahas as they're doing this day crafting work that might lead them towards better connections?
So one of the further details in day crafting, there's a whole load of tools that solve different problems, but then there are these methods. And a method of day crafting is this idea of a notion of something that can float throughout the day and it can apply in loads of different situations, whereas a tool is just to kind of solve one problem. So of the 6 methods, one of them is play, one of them is connection, keep coming back to that. One of them is moments. So getting to talking about moments, and one of the things I like to frame this around is the idea of you designing. Remember, we are designers of days. What about designing your perfect day? What about designing a day so remarkable it stays with you for the rest of your life? People, depending on who they are, think that this is a crazy idea. How could I possibly dive into the idea of crafting the perfect day? Well, I never ask them that. I get them to walk around the house and come back with some mementos, and then to talk about the story of that memento. And the memento they bring back is from that trip that they made to Africa, and they were in a village and there was this thing and they bought it and it looks like a bit of rubbish, but for them, and they start to talk about this day that they were in. So here is an accidental moment that you can start to piece together. Now, why am I talking about moments that are worth remembering or whole days that become remarkable? Because who are you apart from the story of who you are? We are story creatures. Now, scary thing to do is to type your birth date into Google and it'll tell you how many days you've been alive. How many of those do you remember? Well, of the 35,000, I can probably remember 5. Well, I think we can do better than that. I think let's actually deliberately start to create. So let's think of some days that were remarkable, memorable for you. What sort of things were you doing? Different people's remarkable days or memorable moments have different ingredients. It might be a moment of pride when you finally got that qualification or won the big client for your company or whatever. Now, although there might be 20 different potential ingredients, there's one thing that every remarkable moment, memorable day has, and that's you gave your full attention to the moment. Otherwise, it wouldn't have got lodged in there. And I think that if you want to become this rich, interesting, desirable, even person who carries this resource of stories around with you, because they are the story of who you are, you need to have the resource of being able to give your full attention to the moment in front of you. So this is kind of part 1 of a long, rambly answer. The second, I'm going to make this really short, is to set yourself the expectation that you will have a memorable moment today. The biggest, most important word in day crafting is preparation. It is just setting the groundwork so that we can be present in those moments, or we can get through a day's work without being totally exhausted, or we can get to this wonderful opportunity for effective rest and actually make the most of it. There's just a little bit of preparation. I've got this this idea that occurred to me recently. I've called it the 1% principle, and it's of the 960 minutes you're awake, every day, averagely,
Mhm.
just about 1% of that is 10 minutes. So, what about this challenge? If you want to have a go at day crafting,
Mhm.
what could you do with this 1% principle just today or tomorrow, or maybe every day for the next week? So, I'm not asking you to change your life. Change is a very scary word to the big, that big default part of us, which is in the present moment. So why experiments are good, because they don't require us to change. They just require us to play. We're not actually being forced to do anything that's too scary. So yeah, 10 minutes every day for a week. What could you do?
Mm. Bruce, will you think about this sentence stem? If only people knew, what would you say based on what we've been talking about today? If only people knew when it comes to crafting their day, when it comes to living a good life.
If only people knew that the good life wasn't a future destination, that all they needed to do was to think, what could I do to reshape a couple of hours later on today, maybe even just 10 minutes, and make that the very best that it could be. And learning that one technique, do the same thing tomorrow and the day after.
Let's talk now about places where people can find you. If there's any resources you want to share, we'll put all these notes in the episode description.
Day crafting. If people search for day crafting on their favorite social platform, they'll probably find a feed of silly little reels from me. There is a daycrafting.com website. There are 5 day crafting workbooks that you can find on Amazon that start off at an introductory level, but then steer people towards things like productivity or self-care or change. Via the website, there are probably courses that are just about to start that people could jump onto if they would like to do that. The other thing that I'd really love to mention is that day crafting is at the stage now where I'm looking to train other people to be doing what I'm doing. So I have a couple of fellow mentors. I've never quite found the right word for what it is that we do, but other people that have practiced this enough to be able to start doing it for other people. I would love some other people to pick up the craft and start teaching it, because I only come with my flavor. It's like learning pottery from one teacher. I want to see what some other people would do with it.
Bruce, thank you so much. I have a many a notes over here, and I'm going to continue to be thinking about our conversation. I'm looking forward to staying connected to your work, and hope some folks reach out to you to get engaged in that and expand, to your point, the flavor of day crafting. I love so many of the terms that you use. This idea that we're a resource of stories, that was really resonating with me. And then thinking a lot about where our energy is. And when you were talking about the energy that goes out, did you say we prioritize the energy that's going out?
Yes. Yeah, we think we structure our days around the energy that goes out into our work, into whatever. We don't think nearly enough about the energy that comes in. So, last illustration of that,
Mhm.
if I was to ask most of your listeners to name the number that goes with mastery, how many hours of practice does it require you to become a master at something? Now, I imagine some of your listeners are going to be shouting 10,000 hours
Mhm.
at us. What you didn't get from reading Malcolm Gladwell's book is that 12,500 hours of really high quality, effective rest that those Juilliard musicians put into their day, 12,500 to fuel the 10,000 hours of practice, not to mention really good quality sleep. So we mustn't forget that. We must remember that to be at our best, work on maintenance first.
I think so many people learn that one the hard way. It's
Yeah.
not until the moments of burnout, and so many folks have come on the podcast and shared their story of being in the corporate world, for example, and then having a moment of burnout and then totally changing courses in this and that way. And I wonder if more people early on were thinking about crafting their day in the way that you're describing, wouldn't necessarily need to leave in order to find that. Although some may still need to leave, to be clear, but others may be able to stay where they are if it's the right place.
Oh, they are the easiest people to work with, though, the people that have felt the pain and
Mhm.
are at the front of the queue saying, I will never let that happen to me again.
Yeah.
They're quite receptive.
Wonderful. Bruce, thank you so much again for your time. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Again, I'm excited to stay connected to your work.
My pleasure. Thank you.